A Glimpse of Who We Are, Chapter 3, Life in America. The plane ride to America was awesome. I have always loved the sound an airplane makes when it takes off and when it lands. I love the feeling of flying. Perhaps that is why I fly a lot in my dreams. We arrived in the evening. Issevy and I were dead tired. One of our parents, Avon, I believe, opened the door. I vividly recalled the sun setting on our house, its reddish, soft color. It and everything around was beautiful. The exterior of the house was well kept. There were flowers on each side of the steps leading to the front door. It was evident that my mother kept a very clean house. As soon as we entered the house, we began taking off our shoes. That was how my mother liked it. Even in Togo, Avon did not waste a single second before laying down the rules with a very stern, frowning face. Issevy and I were sitting on the foot of the first two stairs. We were facing the front door, whose upper region was made of some sort of glass. To our left was a big fish tank with a variety of fish. This was where the living room was. It was extremely clean and was off limits to us children. To the left wall was a multicolored sofa. Issevy and I did not understand what Avon was saying, but his facial expressions were helpful. Besides, my mother was doing her best to translate the English words into Ewe for us. I was definitely not getting a good feeling about our new stepfather. He told us that same day not to call him Dad or Papa. We were to call him by his first name. For the ensuing 5 years that we would live with him, Avon would never have a friend over the house nor go visit anyone. As far as we knew, he did not have any friends. The two major things in his life were the family and work, and he failed miserably at the former. When he was not beating us with the electrical cord, he was downstairs in his office working on his computer program. We really did not know much about him. I did not dare be direct with him by asking questions because I feared he would whip me. In terms of his brother, he once said, "It would not surprise me if he were in prison or dead." Issevy and I were in his office when he said this. He did not give any explanations. There were so many questions that I wanted to ask him. I so wanted to ask him about his childhood and what happened between him and his brother. I also wanted to know why his first wife left him. I thought this particular question was inappropriate to ask, but if I were to ask, I could have phrased it so that it was appropriate. I recall him saying that she left one day without saying anything. Good for her, I had thought when I learned about this. Perhaps she had seen bad signs. If I knew her name, I would have searched for her. We also did not know anything about his parents. Maybe they were dead. After Avon's long speech and translations of the household rules, my mother asked us boys if we wanted to eat or to go to sleep. We opted for sleep because we were exhausted. She took us to the computer room. She had 2 beds already prepared for us with nice pillows and bed sheets and covers neatly tucked in. We slept all the way through the evening and the night. Morning found us rejuvenated. We showered and ate breakfast with our mother. She made pancakes. I hated pancakes in those days. They were so thick and difficult to swallow. My throat suffocated. Often I had to drink an awful lot of vitamin D milk to wash it down. My mother gave us so much of it. Breakfast seemed to last forever. It was a complete torture. If we did not clean the plate, then we were threatened with a butt whooping by Avon. His infamous line for why we had to eat everything on the plate was, "There are children starving in Africa." At first, I did not understand what that meant, but after a few mornings of repeating the same thing, I needed no translation. He seemed to take delight in the fact that Issevy and I had difficulty adjusting to the new food. After breakfast, my mother showed us the inside and exterior of the house. The interior was as nice as the exterior. There were 5 bedrooms, 3 full baths, a living room, a family room equipped with a television. The kitchen was a little elevated vis-a-vis the family room. The kitchen had 2 sections and was near the dining room. On the first floor, to the left, was the computer room where we slept the first night. Our bedroom was to the right of the computer room. Next to the right of our room was our bathroom, which directly faced the stairs. A few yards away was Avon and my mother's master bedroom. Their room was immense, in my eyes at least. Deep in the back, to the right, in the corner was a television, which sat on top of a small table with a VCR. It was an old television, but it worked well. Their bed was near the door. It was a nice bed, twice the size of our beds. The head of the bed was high, had a tall mirror and dressers on each side. Avon slept on the side closest to the door. In one of these drawers was a handgun. He would show me one day. He said the gun was to protect the family. I was not sure about this. We did not live in a violent neighborhood. On the first floor, next to the family room, was another full bathroom. One day, Avon called me into his bedroom to show me how to use the gun. We sat on the bed. He opened the drawer and took out the gun. The drawer was locked with the key. He brought out the gun and a bullet. Be careful, I'll show you how to load it. He was explaining to me how to use the gun, but I was too nervous to understand all of the instructions. Turn it and be careful. Once the bullets are in the holes, you aim and shoot. If you point, then you shoot. No hesitation. Understood? Yes, I answered. Now it's your turn. Do exactly as I say. He had me load the gun a few times before letting me go free. It was a very uncomfortable time with him. I was happy to leave. The palms of my hands were sweating. I rubbed them against each other and against my clothes. I held the gun with both hands and pointed it at the air. It was as if I were in a movie. In the movies, people with guns usually were tough. I did not feel tough. I was afraid inside. The shudder went through my body and maintained its hold around my heart, chest, and stomach areas all at the same time. Avon put the gun back into the dresser. Well, now you know where it is, he said. I was the only child to whom he showed the gun. About 3 days after arriving in Sacramento, California, my language learning would begin. It started when I was in the garage doing something. When one of the neighborhood children on a skateboard rode by, he asked me a question. I stared at him, trying to understand. It appeared to me that he could tell I did not understand what he was saying. Still, I wanted to say something, but could not muster a single comprehensible word. Recall the 2 words and a sentence that I learned in Kusuntu. Yes, no, and could you please pass me the ketchup? I thought about using one of the first 2, but I had absolutely no idea what my new neighbor was saying. As my new friend spoke, I focused on the awesome skateboard. I had seen one of them on television, and they looked really cool. The young people who were riding them knew awesome moves, yet I was sure I could not do all those flips and turns. Finally, he waved goodbye to me and disappeared to the right side of the house. I felt like I had a lot to learn language-wise. The feeling of being lost increased when I went to school. I felt out of place inside myself. I was 12 years old in the 4th grade. I was not sure whether or not to cry or to feel sorry for myself. I was behind in school in Togo, but that was different. Most of the children were also behind in their studies, so I did not feel badly about this. In this Californian school, however, things were different. The majority of the students were the same age. They could read and write very well in their own language. I could read and write too in my own language, but I had the impression that they were better at it than I was in their own native language. For this reason, I kept my age to myself for the most part. Most of the children were 3 years younger than me. However, I was about their size physically. Some of them were even taller than me. My main teacher was Mr. Jordan, a tall, slender, quiet-spoken white man. I would say that our racial makeup was pretty good. There was a Native American girl in the class, some black children, as well as a good number of white children. I did not understand a thing in the classes. I focused on reading the teachers and my fellow classmates' physical expressions and emotions. This seemed to help. In addition, 2 girls and a boy adopted me as their mentee. The girls helped me with my history and English courses. My brunette friend made sure that I sat next to her, often explaining things to me with gestures. Elizabeth, the other girl, was skinny blonde and a little taller than me. During lunch, she directed me to her table. The boy showed me how to play during recess. My mother's after-school lessons also seemed to help, though I did not appreciate her abuse of the belt. She was a traditional African teacher with a whip in hand to make sure SAV and I were taking our studies seriously. Overall, I enjoyed my education for about the first 2 months before things began to take a turn for the worse at school. One of the 4th grade black students who had a different main teacher discovered that I was from Africa. Every day during recess, he would run and snatch anything that was mine that he could seize. It was really annoying. Every day when I returned home, my mother would ask me how school was. I gave her a routine answer. Everything was fine. That sometimes was not sufficient. She often dug deeper until she got something. Her advice to me about most things at school, as well as the super active boy Andrew taking my jacket and other clothing possessions, was, tell him, leave me alone. This I did for weeks. One would have thought that after the first week, I would have tried a different approach. I did not. In the meantime, the name calling and the jacket grabbing continued. Andrew continued calling me African booty scratcher. I knew what it meant to scratch something, but I definitely did not know what the whole expression meant. In any case, I did not like it because I knew he was insulting me. One day during recess, Andrew swooped by, grabbing my jacket. Mr. Jordan was a few feet away, seeing all this. I was close to his classroom. Andrew was at a distance, laughing at me. Give it back to me, I yelled out. The more I yelled, the more he seemed to snicker and amuse himself. In one intense moment of determination, I took off, running after Andrew like a cougar. I ran after him faster than I could ever recall in my life. He ran off too. I chased him at an incredible speed. He tried veering at different directions. Each time his attempts were in vain. I caught up with him in no time. I seized him by the hand. I launched punches at him so fast that you would have thought I was a professional boxer. I threw punch after punch while posing the question, are you going to do it again? Several punches later, he still did not answer. Are you? Speak up, I shouted, thinking about Avon's daily commands to us at home. Soon, I realized that it was not that he did not want to answer. He was too busy suffering, for I was punching him very hard and fast. I seized and snapped my jacket out of his hand. From that day on, Andrew never took anything of mine again. In fact, we became friends. Whenever he saw me at recess after that, he was very polite and wanted to play with me. When I went home that afternoon, my mother asked me how school was. My answer was, it was good. She did not dig any deeper, probably because of the big smile on my face. It was not long before I started making friends at school. One of them was Jessica. She was tall and was half black and half white. She told me that the boy who came by the garage during the first few days of my arrival was her older brother. Jessica was a nice person. I sensed that she thought I was different, but not weird. She sometimes observed me. Once at school during recess, I recalled my classmates running away from bees but the basketball court, which was behind our 4th grade class. I did not think it was necessary to run. There were only a few bees. One of them was flying in the air clumsily, for it had been smacked or hit by one of the children out of fear. I reached out my hand and let it fall in my reddish-like palm. I was looking at it to see if it was alright. After a while, I put him down on the ground and took my leave. Jessica was watching me at a distance. You were talking to it, she exclaimed. Talking? I asked, puzzled. I did not recall saying anything out loud to the bee. But then it dawned on me that she was talking about a different kind of communication. Talking is not the only type of communication. You weren't afraid of it. She was making comments, and each time I sensed the sincerity in her words, but did not answer. I did not know what to tell her. I was simply being myself. I had overcome my school bully and saved the bee. Life was great. I was being fed well at home and was learning to read and write in English. I was even free to be my playful self around my mother. I recall walking home one day and simply being happy for no apparent reason. I did not recall why SAV was not with me. I had a big book bag on and was in good spirits. Up ahead, just a few yards away, was my mother. Her back was turned and she was in a crouching position, her garden implements ascending and descending with her hand upon the earth. I walked quietly and quickly, almost there, gingerly now. I was in position, right behind my mother. I wanted for her to stop digging. "Hi!" I shouted as I seized her with both hands. "Ah!" she screamed with much fright. She said hello and hugged me. "You scared me." She asked how school was, and I told her that it went okay and that I had some homework to do. About 2.5 months after coming to America, my luck was about to change for the worse. I was quickly becoming aware of the fact that my stepfather was a very quote-unquote special soul in every aspect of the word. I felt that the freedom Issei and I had experienced in West Africa was going to vanish. Every morning when we children woke up, he also got up at the same time to check up on us. I supposed he wanted to make sure we were up on time. I found his morning ritual quite peculiar. He always walked into our room completely naked. At 12 years old, I found this bizarre, partially because he was not circumcised. Every morning was about the same. "You're getting up too soon, like you're having a nightmare. Go back to sleep a little longer. 5 more minutes. It's not good for your health to wake up that fast in such a hurry," he would say. He even came to check up on us, sometimes at night, late into the night. Perchance this was his way of showing he cared, but it did not make me feel better. To avoid him coming into the room, sometimes Issei and I would fake sleeping by snoring loudly enough so that he would turn away. Sometimes he came into the room and would turn on the light and chat with us briefly. I did not mind the chatting, but for the love of God, why did a 10 and 12-year-old boys have to see their naked stepfather every night before going to bed? If we were going to have nightmares, this would have been the cause of them. I mean, I had seen his penis so many times that even now, as I write this book, the visuals of the genitals are unfortunately still easily accessible to my mind's eye. The other thing that he did that was not at all to my liking was how he disturbed our bathing. We would be showering and boom, the shower curtain would be opened brusquely. He did it with such agility each time that we never knew when he had entered the bathroom. He would let the flowing water run through his hand, checking to see if we were using too much hot water. "You should not use too much hot water," he would often say with a frown. He would turn the knob to the left so that the water became lukewarm and often cold. That forced it to shower faster. In fact, I had developed a plan that would put an end to all this. I would shower really fast and be in my room before he got to the bathroom. This did not work. One day, I had showered fast and was putting on lotion when he came into the bathroom. "Did you shower already?" "Yes." He looked at me for a good second. "You're not clean. Go back and take another one." There was no winning with this guy. I was quickly understanding that Avon liked being in control. My mother was no exception for him. Once I found I had to stay home because of a headache. We were on the 2nd floor. My mother and Avon were near the bedroom door. "How's your head?" he asked me. "Okay." He then asked me to go to him. He put his right hand to my forehead. "I don't think it's necessary for me to stay home," I said. This was the 3rd day that he was keeping me home, unnecessarily for the headache. I felt well enough to return to school. I don't think it's a good idea for him to go to school. His head is still a little warm. My mother had her work uniform on. She was working as a cashier at the supermarket. This was the 3rd day Avon was obliging her to stay home with me. She touched my forehead and didn't say anything. "You know what you have to do. His health is more important than working. You have to take care of your family above all else. What are you going to do?" "I'll stay home with him and go back to work tomorrow. I think you should seriously consider not working altogether." I was 12 years old, but even I could figure out what was happening, what my stepfather was doing. He was trying to control her. For a person to submit herself docilely to the other, it is always necessary for the other who is in control to find a weakness in the other person. The point must sufficiently and emotionally be strong enough so that the submissive person does not oppose too fast. In this case, my stepfather had found this vulnerable point. My mother's love for me. She submitted to his manipulation, his control, his domination. I'm employing the word domination here because that is usually the underlying goal of control. If my mother did not work, she would have been obliged to do as he wished. Years later, my mother would expand on this. I was not able to continue taking my classes at the junior college because he told me to stop. Oh yeah? I always wondered why you stopped, but I didn't know that he told you to stop. She only had a few more courses before completing her 2-year degree. She never did. I had only been in the country for a year, but was in a complete despair. One day, when I was alone in the house, I walked to the window in my bedroom on the second floor. Various images and a few facts of Avon came to my mind. He was about 5 foot and 7 inches tall. Over the years, I would gather some information here and there about him. He wore glasses and hardly smiled. He was in the military for less than a year and was discharged or let go of, but I would never learn the reason why. In terms of his first wife, he would not explain to any of us or my mother. Furthermore, I once saw a picture of his family. From the quantity of people, one could see that he came from a large family. With the exception of his sister on the phone, the rest of the family did not know where he was or how he was doing in life. Once he stood in the kitchen talking to his sister on the phone. The gestures with which he took small steps and his tone of voice inspired pity. He did not like his brother in particular. From time to time, his sister would call the house and speak to him, but she never came to visit. He seemed a wounded soul, and I wish I had known this sooner. Unfortunately, his negativity would reduce my positivity. My despair ran deep. One day, I looked out of the window with a heavy heart. There was a tree. Its branches reached the roof. The branches and leaves undulated in the breeze. They seemed peaceful. That was not my state of mind. As I watched the leaves and branches dance in silence, I kept asking myself, when is all this going to end? It was a general question. I was not necessarily asking when I would no longer live in the household. I was asking myself how much longer I was going to endure this life. Then one day, relief came. Well, at least I thought. It was in the evening, about 9 p.m. My mother and my stepfather had an argument. Avon had said something really hurtful to her. It had cut my mother so deeply that she called me from her bedroom with sorrow in her voice. Tell your brother to pack. We're leaving. I was not sure what to feel. I certainly did not like living in the household with Avon. But where were we going to go? I did not think my mother knew anyone with whom we could stay permanently. I did not want to be homeless. I went to the room and related the decision to Essevi. It was about 10:30 a.m. We were packing. I packed very slowly because deep inside of me, I knew that we were not going anywhere. I guessed this because as I walked away, Avon was softly caressing Dada and calling her baby. His caresses were slow and appeared to be full of compassion. His voice was smooth and tender. This was not the Avon I knew. He was working his magic, and it worked. A few minutes later, she called us and said, unpack your things. Nearly 3 years later, Avon and my mother made plans for us to return to Kusuntu to bring Mesa, our youngest brother. We had been informed about this weeks beforehand. Presently, we were in the back seat of the car in the parking lot of a supermarket. Avon was in the driver's seat, while my mother was in the passenger seat. She was telling us about the trip. Avon turned his head toward us like a soldier with a stiff, mechanical movement. He kept his frowning face upon us as my mother spoke. It was an intense, scary look with his neck jerked forward like a soldier who was ready to kill his enemies or to throw himself on a prey. We were his prey. If only he could have seen how silly he looked. This guy was too much. Are you listening to your mother? He barked at us like a dog. Yes, we answered right away. If she tells you to bark like a dog, you bark like a dog. If she tells you to jump, what do you do? Jump? I answered. No, you ask how high. He didn't understand how ridiculous he was being. We weren't the type of children who purposely disobeyed their parents. And when she tells you to jump, what do you do? He asked, reviewing his directives with us. We bark, I answered. Now get out of the car. He certainly didn't have to ask me twice. We quickly got out of there and went to the supermarket. We went to Togo and returned a few weeks later. We returned with Missa. I turned 15 about a month later. Everything was the same at our household. Constant scolding and physical beatings. There was one occasion that I do not believe that I would ever forget. I was 15 years old and had been in the state for 3 years. An eternity, especially living with my terrorist stepfather. If he could not be called a terrorist, then I did not know who could. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening. Shortly after he came home, he asked me if I had finished doing my homework. He did not look happy. He seemed irritated by something. Not all of it. I don't really understand the geometry homework. What don't you understand? He asked with a serious, menacing air about him. He had not even seen the homework, but yet he was upset at me for not understanding it. Go bring it. I went upstairs to get it. I handed Avon the piece of paper, which he looked at for a few seconds. It's not difficult. You're being lazy. I definitely was not being lazy. I really did not understand how to solve the problem. I had read and examined the math exercise several times. There were diagrams on the paper, and I was to say what kind of a triangle they were and why. We had studied all sorts of shapes such as parallelograms and trapezoids. This particular question was about trapezoids, but I do not recall the latter part of the question. I'm going to work out. When I return, I want it done. It was futile, I thought. He was definitely going to whip me that night because the only way to get out of that problem was to lie, and I had never lied to him up to that point, despite all that he had done. I was upstairs in my room when he returned. Avon called me from the kitchen. I brought the homework because I knew he was going to ask for it. I handed it to him. Did you understand when I explained it to you? I think so, but I'm not sure. Avon must have sensed that I was trying to appease him, for he gave me a frown. Go get the whip. It was not an ordinary whip. It was a thick brown electrical cord that he folded. My hand opened the closet door, afraid to take the whip from the wall, but yet knew sooner or later I had to do it. Many thoughts ran through my mind as I stood there. I imagined the sharp pain in my feet and buttocks. A voice augmented the fear of my immediate future. Hurry up, Avon shouted at me. I reached for the whip. Hesitating, I seized it, the brutal weapon, and with a reluctant, painful hesitation, handed it to my master. Whoever was being beaten was the one who usually retrieved the whip from the closet. This was the worst part of physical abuse experience. I wondered if he had calculated this as part of his terrorist activity. Go to the computer room, undress yourself, and wait for me. I'll be there soon. I wondered if his parents always beat him without any clothes on. With the exception of my white underwear, I was practically naked. I became anxious as I waited. As I heard him mount the stairs, my heart beat faster. The stairs seemed to creak ever faster as he climbed. It was as if the acceleration of each step were calculated. I felt like a prey who was recoiling with each step. Maybe it was the devil himself who was coming after me, and just maybe he was delighting in the thought that my fear could be felt. Finally, he stood in front of me, armed with the whip. Now explain to me what you don't understand, he said. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I want to understand. Let me try again. What? Are you dumb or what? It's been 2 hours since you have been working on the same problem. He whipped my buttocks, each strike with more force. He could not slow down. It seemed as if he did, even for a fraction of a second, he would be depriving himself of some twisted pleasure. He whipped me hard and fast. He was sweating, really sweating. Still, he would not obey the law of fatigue. He was breathing deeply. Finally, he stopped to ask me questions. Why are you lying? Try as I might, I could not give him satisfactory answers. Stop saying stupid things. Once again, he was whipping me. Why are you lying? He whipped me all over, on my back, my hands, etc. The whip even reached my genitals. That was the most sharp and penetrating feeling of the night. When he was really tired, he stopped again to give me a moral lesson. You know, lying is not good. Why did you lie? I was confused. I was trying to answer his question in a way that would suit him. I had to answer quickly, for my previous strategy of being truthful was not working. I'm sorry, I don't know. Say it. Say that you understood the problem and were pretending not to understand. Was he insane? He could not possibly have thought that I was pretending. He was insane. We were quiet for what appeared an eternity. I was thinking about when I would be allowed to go to bed. It was getting late, and my butt and the back of my feet were bruised. The left top corner of my back was bleeding. Answer me when I talk to you, he launched at me with full force. He took me by the neck and threw me on the floor. Do you hear me? He slapped me and spread my body on the white carpet floor with force. Then he put his knees on my feet and shook my body violently. I lied there with him on top. He held down my two hands crossed above my head. Answer me when I talk to you. Do you understand me? Yes. His eyes and face were upon mine. I felt his breath and saliva. He spat all over my face, including my lips, as he hurled comments at me. It was disgusting. Some saliva had slipped in between my lips. I brought my lips together as tightly as I possibly could in order to prevent further damage. My greatest wish at that point was to rinse my mouth with Listerine.